What if I told you that while Major League Baseball banned black players for 60 years, your ancestors built their own baseball empire that rivaled and often beat the best white teams in America? What if I told you the greatest pitcher in baseball history never threw a single official pitch in the so-called Major Leagues? What if I told you a black catcher hit more home runs than Babe Ruth, dominated with a higher batting average than any player in history, and they erased his name from the record books for 77 years? July 21st, 1942. Griffith Stadium, Washington, D.C. 48,000 fans packed into the stadium. This was the largest crowd of the entire baseball season. Not for the Washington Senators, not for the New York Yankees. This crowd came for the East-West All-Star Game, Negro Leagues baseball. On the mound stands Satchel Paige, 36 years old, throwing fastballs over 100 miles per hour. Behind the plate crouches Josh Gibson, the man they called the Black Babe Ruth, the man who hit 69 home runs that season, more than Babe Ruth ever hit in a single year. In the stands sit more fans than attended any Major League Baseball game that year. Black families dressed in their Sunday best. Fathers pointing at Satchel Paige, telling their sons that man, right there, is the greatest pitcher who ever lived. Mothers telling their daughters about Josh Gibson. He hits the ball farther than any man alive. The crack of the bat echoes through the stadium. The smell of hot dogs and peanuts mixes with summer heat. Children watch their heroes with eyes full of wonder. These weren't minor league players. These weren't inferior athletes. These were the best baseball players in America, and Major League Baseball banned them because of the color of their skin. What happened over the next 40 years would be buried in the footnotes of history. The greatest baseball league America never acknowledged. The millionaire athletes who played for pennies in the South. The multi-million-dollar empire that integration destroyed. Until now, this is your stolen history. And after you hear it, you'll understand why your grandfather talked about Satchel Paige with more reverence than any MLB star. You'll understand why your grandmother's eyes lit up when she remembered seeing Josh Gibson play. This isn't ancient history. This is your family's legacy. And they tried to erase every single bit of it. By the end of this video, you'll know why Josh Gibson's career batting average of .372 is now officially higher than Ty Cobb's. You'll know why Satchel Paige struck out Major League All-Stars in exhibition games repeatedly, and they refused to let him in. You'll know why Negro Leagues teams regularly beat MLB teams when they played each other. And you'll understand why Jackie Robinson's 1947 integration, celebrated as progress, also destroyed the wealthiest black sports institution in American history. This isn't just baseball history. This explains why black communities lost hundreds of millions in wealth, why thousands of black workers, managers, coaches, umpires, and business owners lost their jobs overnight, why integration was both victory and theft. If your grandfather ever talked about seeing Satchel Paige pitch, now you'll understand why his eyes lit up. If your grandmother told stories about Josh Gibson hitting balls out of the stadium, now you'll know she wasn't exaggerating. She was telling you about the greatest hitter in baseball history, a man whose records were buried for 77 years because America couldn't handle the truth. This isn't their history. This is your history, your inheritance, your stolen legacy. Your ancestors didn't just survive segregation. They thrived despite it. They built a multi-million-dollar sports empire while being denied access to white leagues. And when the doors finally opened, they lost everything they'd built. After this video, you'll never see integration the same way again. You'll understand why progress isn't always progress, why opening doors in white institutions meant closing black-owned businesses, why your community lost wealth that should have been passed down for generations. Let's begin with the truth they buried. Let's start with the color line, 1880s through 1890s. A few black players competed in baseball. Not the major leagues, but semi-professional teams, amateur leagues. Some even made it to the minor leagues. Moses Fleetwood Walker played for the Toledo Blue Stockings in 1884. He was the last black player in what would become the organized white professional leagues for the next 63 years. Cap Anson changed everything. White baseball star, famous player, racist to his core. 1887. Anson refused to play against teams with black players. He threatened to walk off the field. He threatened to cancel games. He had power, he had influence, and he used both to push black players out. By the 1890s, Major League Baseball and all its associated minor leagues had an unwritten rule, a gentleman's agreement they called it. No black players allowed. Period. It wasn't in the rule book. It didn't need to be. Every team owner understood. Every manager knew. Every scout followed the policy. Don't sign black players. Don't even consider them. Keep baseball white. Think about what that means. Imagine having the talent, having the skill, having worked your entire life to be the best at something, and being told you can't compete because of your skin color. Not because you're not good enough, because you're too black. But here's what white America didn't count on. Black folks didn't sit around waiting for permission. They didn't beg for access. They didn't accept second-class status. They built their own league. 1920. Kansas City, Missouri. Rube Foster gathered 8 black baseball team owners. Foster was called the father of black baseball. Former pitcher, team manager, brilliant strategist. He stood before these men and said, "We're going to create our own major league. We're not waiting for MLB to change their minds. We're building our own empire." February 13th, 1920. The Negro National League was born. 8 founding teams: Chicago American Giants, Chicago Giants, Cuban Stars, Dayton Marcos, Detroit Stars, Indianapolis ABCs, Kansas City Monarchs, St. Louis Giants. White folks said it wouldn't work. They said black people couldn't organize something that big. They said there wasn't enough money in black communities to support professional baseball. They said nobody would come to the games. They were wrong about everything. By 1923, a second league formed, the Eastern Colored League, 6 teams on the East Coast. By 1937, the Negro American League launched. By the 1940s, over 30 teams played in multiple leagues across the country. Hundreds of players, millions of fans, tens of millions of dollars in revenue. The Negro National League, the Eastern Colored League, the Negro American League, the Negro Southern League. These weren't small-time operations. These were major leagues, professional organizations with contracts, schedules, championships, and all-star games. Peak attendance came in the 1940s. Over 3 million fans per year attended Negro Leagues games. 3 million. Let that sink in. During World War II, when America was supposedly united, 3 million black Americans paid money to watch their own baseball league because MLB still banned black players. The 1943 East-West All-Star Game drew 51,723 fans to Comiskey Park in Chicago. You know how many people attended the MLB All-Star Game that same year? Less than that. Negro Leagues baseball outdrew Major League Baseball's biggest game. These games filled the biggest stadiums in America: Yankee Stadium in New York, Comiskey Park in Chicago, Griffith Stadium in Washington, D.C., Forbes Field in Pittsburgh. These weren't black-only venues. These were MLB stadiums that Negro Leagues teams rented because their games drew bigger crowds than some MLB teams. Black newspapers covered every game: the Chicago Defender, the Pittsburgh Courier, the Baltimore Afro-American. These papers ran full-box scores, player statistics, team standings, and championship coverage. The black community followed Negro Leagues baseball like America follows the NFL today. Players were celebrities, heroes, role models. Satchel Paige made $30,000 to $40,000 per year in the 1940s. That's over $500,000 in today's money. More than many Major League Baseball players earned. Josh Gibson made similar money. These weren't struggling athletes hoping for a break. These were stars making real money in a thriving industry. But the conditions they faced. Lord, the conditions. 200+ games every season. Sometimes 3 games in one day. Travel by bus through the Jim Crow South. Sleep on the bus because hotels wouldn't rent rooms to black people. Eat sandwiches from the back door of restaurants because they couldn't sit inside. Use gas station bathrooms if they were lucky, woods if they weren't. Picture a team bus driving through Mississippi in July. No air conditioning, 95-degree heat. Players sleeping in seats, waking up in the next city, putting on uniforms still damp with yesterday's sweat, and playing a doubleheader. Then back on the bus. Drive through the night. Wake up. Play again. And through all of that, they dominated. They played better baseball than most MLB teams. When Negro Leagues teams played exhibition games against MLB teams, guess who won Negro Leagues? Teams won 60 to 70% of those games. This wasn't competitive. This was domination. But Major League Baseball refused to acknowledge it. White newspapers barely covered Negro Leagues games. When they did, the language was dismissive. Negro baseball, colored league. Never the respect of calling them professional. Never the acknowledgement that these athletes were world-class. The Negro Leagues built an entire economic ecosystem. Black team owners like Cum Posey of the Homestead Grays, J.L. Wilkinson of the Kansas City Monarchs. These men built businesses worth millions. They employed hundreds of people. Players, yes, but also managers, coaches, scouts, umpires, groundskeepers, bus drivers, ticket sellers, concession workers. Black umpires worked every game. Black managers made every decision. Black scouts found every player. This was black economic power on display. Wealth creation, job creation, business ownership. In the 1920s through 1940s, when Jim Crow laws restricted black people in every other industry, Negro Leagues baseball was a multi-million-dollar black-owned and black-operated industry. Estimates say the Negro Leagues generated over $50 million per year in revenue at their peak in the 1940s. That's nearly $1 billion in today's money. Every year, for decades. All of that money circulating in black communities. All of those jobs supporting black families. All of that wealth building black generational prosperity. Supporting businesses thrived alongside the teams. Black-owned hotels near stadiums. Black-owned restaurants feeding fans. Black-owned transportation companies moving teams. The ripple effect was enormous. Negro Leagues baseball didn't just entertain, it employed, it uplifted, it built wealth. Kansas City, Missouri, home of the Kansas City Monarchs, 18th and Vine District, the Jazz District. On game days, that neighborhood exploded with economic activity. Hotels booked solid, restaurants packed, shops filled. Thousands of people spending money in a black neighborhood, creating wealth, building businesses, supporting families. Birmingham, Alabama, home of the Birmingham Black Barons. Same story. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Homestead Grays. Washington, D.C., where the Grays also played. Newark, New Jersey, Newark Eagles. Chicago, Illinois, Chicago American Giants. Every city with a Negro Leagues team saw economic benefits for the black community, but white America didn't care. As far as MLB was concerned, Negro Leagues didn't exist. Despite the talent, despite the attendance, despite the revenue, despite everything. Black baseball was invisible to white America. And that brings us to the players. Oh, the players. Because here's what they don't teach you in school. Negro Leagues players weren't just good, they were the best. When they finally got chances to play in the major leagues after 1947, they proved it immediately. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, you need to meet two men, two legends, two players so dominant, so skilled, so transcendent, that even 77 years of erasure couldn't destroy their legacy. You need to meet Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson was born December 21st, 1911 in Buena Vista, Georgia. His parents, Mark and Nancy Gibson, moved the family to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, when Josh was 3 years old. They were part of the Great Migration. Hundreds of thousands of black families fleeing the Jim Crow South, looking for opportunity in northern cities. Pittsburgh, steel town, working class, hard. Josh's father worked in the steel mills. Dangerous work, long hours, low pay. But it was better than sharecropping in Georgia. It was a chance. Young Josh grew up watching his father leave before sunrise, come home after sunset. Exhausted, but determined to provide for his family. Josh didn't go to steel mills. He went to baseball fields. By age 16, he was playing for amateur teams around Pittsburgh. By 18, he was the talk of the neighborhood. This kid could hit. Not just hit. Destroy. The ball exploded off his bat. Home runs that traveled distances nobody had seen before. July 1930. Josh Gibson was 18 years old, watching a game between the Homestead Grays and Kansas City Monarchs. The Grays catcher got injured mid-game. Somebody in the crowd yelled, "Put in Gibson." The manager, either desperate or inspired, pulled this teenager from the stands and put him behind the plate. Gibson caught the rest of the game. He had never caught for a professional team before. Didn't matter. He handled it like he'd been doing it for years. And when his turn came to bat, he hit a home run. Just like that. 18 years old, first professional at bat, home run. He never left. From that day in July 1930 until his death in January 1947, Josh Gibson was the greatest hitter in baseball. Not Negro Leagues baseball. Baseball. Period. Let me give you the numbers. Then I'll tell you why these numbers were buried for 77 years. Then I'll tell you what it means for you. Career batting average 372.372. Do you understand what that means? For every 1,000 times Josh Gibson came to bat, he got a hit 372 times. That's the highest career batting average in baseball history. Higher than Ty Cobb, higher than Rogers Hornsby, higher than Ted Williams, higher than anybody who ever played the game. But wait, it gets better. Career slugging percentage 718.718. That means when Josh Gibson got a hit, it was usually for extra bases, doubles, triples, home runs. He didn't just hit, he punished. That slugging percentage is higher than Babe Ruth's 690, higher than Ted Williams, higher than Barry Bonds, highest in baseball history. Career OPS, on base plus slugging, 1.177, higher than Babe Ruth's 1.164, highest in baseball history. Now here's the part that should make you furious. These numbers were not in the official MLB record books until May 28, 2024. 2024. Josh Gibson died in January 1947. He waited 77 years posthumously for Major League Baseball to admit he was the greatest hitter who ever lived. 77 years. 3 generations of Americans learned that Ty Cobb had the highest batting average. 3 generations learned that Babe Ruth had the highest slugging percentage. 3 generations learned lies, because Josh Gibson's numbers were always there, always documented, always true. MLB just refused to count them. But we're not done with Josh Gibson's story, because the numbers only tell part of it. The power tells the rest. Estimated 800 career home runs, 800, including exhibition games and barnstorming tours. Official Negro Leagues records show nearly 200 documented home runs. But Gibson played year-round, winter ball in Latin America, exhibition games across the U.S., barnstorming tours against MLB players. He hit home runs everywhere. 1933. Pittsburgh. Gibson hit a home run that cleared the right field roof at Forbes Field. The ball landed on the street outside the stadium. No player had ever done that. White or black. The distance was estimated at over 600 feet. 600 feet. Babe Ruth's longest home run was about 575 feet. 1934, playing winter ball in Puerto Rico. Gibson hit 13 home runs in 23 games and batted .467. .467 in 23 games. 1937. Gibson had the greatest single season in baseball history. OPS of 1.474. Not for a month, not for a hot streak, for an entire season. That number has never been matched. Not in Negro Leagues, not in MLB, not anywhere, ever. Legend says Gibson hit a ball out of Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built. Supposedly only Mickey Mantle ever did it. But old-timers who saw Gibson play swear he did it twice. Can't prove it. Records are spotty. But everybody who was there says they saw it. MLB scouts watched Gibson. They filed reports. Those reports still exist in archives. One scout wrote, "Greatest hitter I've ever seen, but we can't sign him." Another wrote, "If Gibson played in the majors, he'd hit 60 home runs every year." Another wrote, "He makes our best hitters look like amateurs." They knew. MLB knew Josh Gibson was the best. They watched him dominate their pitchers in exhibition games. They saw him hit home runs off Bob Feller, one of the greatest pitchers in MLB history. They saw him face Dizzy Dean, another Hall of Famer. Gibson destroyed them, made them look ordinary, and they still wouldn't let him in. Not because he wasn't good enough, because he was black. Picture this. 1943. Josh Gibson is 31 years old, prime of his career. He hit 69 home runs that season. 69. Babe Ruth's famous record was 60 in 1927. Gibson beat it by 9 home runs in 1943, and nobody outside the black community knew about it. While Gibson was hitting 69 home runs, the MLB leader that year was Rudy York with 34. 34. Gibson hit twice as many home runs as the MLB leader, and MLB acted like Gibson didn't exist. Think about what that does to a man. Being the best, knowing you're the best, proving you're the best every single day, and being invisible, being erased, being denied the recognition you earned. Gibson played for 2 main teams in his career, the Homestead Grays and the Pittsburgh Crawfords, both Pittsburgh area teams. The Grays played in both Pittsburgh and Washington, D.C. The Crawfords played in Pittsburgh. Between these 2 teams, Gibson won 9 Negro National League batting titles. 9 in 17 years. More than half his career, he was the batting champion. On those Crawfords teams, Gibson played alongside some of the greatest players in Negro Leagues history. Cool Papa Bell, Oscar Charleston, Judy Johnson. All 3 are in the Baseball Hall of Fame now. Gibson and 4 Hall of Famers on one team. That's how stacked the talent was in Negro Leagues. That's how good these players were. The Homestead Grays won 9 consecutive Negro National League championships from 1937 to 1945. 9 straight. Dynasty. Gibson was the engine, the leader, the star. Opposing pitchers feared him. Fans came to watch him. His teammates rallied around him. But in January 1947, something broke. Josh Gibson suffered a stroke. He was only 35 years old. 35. Athletes today play into their 40s. Gibson was in his prime, and he had a stroke. He died January 20th, 1947. 35 years old. The greatest hitter in baseball history. Gone. 3 months later, Jackie Robinson debuted with the Brooklyn Dodgers. April 15th, 1947. Robinson broke the color barrier. First black player in MLB in the modern era. Historic, revolutionary, long overdue. But Josh Gibson wasn't alive to see it. He died 90 days before the doors opened. 90 days. He spent his entire career on the outside, knowing he was better than the players inside, and he died right before the door finally opened. Many people believe Josh Gibson died of a broken heart. Doctors said stroke. His friends said heartbreak. He knew his time was running out. He knew he would never get his chance. He knew the best hitter in baseball history would never play in the major leagues. Some say he had been drinking heavily in his final years. Depression, frustration, anger at the injustice. Watching younger players like Jackie Robinson get called up, while Gibson, the greatest of all, stayed behind. Can you imagine that pain, being better than everyone, proving it every day for 17 years, and dying knowing you'll never get the recognition you deserve, never get the chance you earned? That's what racism cost Josh Gibson. Not just money, not just fame, his life, the stress, the heartbreak, the injustice. It killed him. His family buried him. The black community mourned. But white America barely noticed. The obituaries in white newspapers were short, a few paragraphs. Negro Leagues star dies. No mention that he was the greatest hitter ever. No acknowledgement of his records. No respect. 25 years later, 1972, the Baseball Hall of Fame finally inducted Josh Gibson. 25 years after his death, his family accepted on his behalf. Better late than never, maybe. But it should never have been late. And even then, even after the Hall of Fame induction, MLB didn't recognize his statistics as official. For another 52 years, from 1972 to 2024, MLB treated Josh Gibson's numbers as unofficial, separate, not part of the real record books, until May 28, 2024. 77 years after his death, MLB finally integrated Negro Leagues statistics into the official record. Josh Gibson's 372 batting average officially became the highest in baseball history. His 718 slugging percentage officially became the highest in baseball history. His 1.177 OPS officially became the highest in baseball history. Ty Cobb dropped to second place. Babe Ruth dropped to second place. The history books changed. Finally. But Josh Gibson's family didn't get an apology. They didn't get reparations. They didn't get the wealth Josh should have earned playing in the major leagues. They got acknowledgement. 77 years too late. That's your stolen history. That's your erased legacy. The greatest hitter who ever lived was a black man from Pittsburgh who died at 35 without ever getting his chance. And they buried his records for 77 years. Now let me tell you about the pitcher who did get his chance. Eventually. At 42 years old. After 22 years in the Negro Leagues. After he should have been retired. After his prime was long gone. And he still dominated. His name was Satchel Paige, and he's the reason your grandfather smiled whenever baseball came up in conversation. Leroy Robert Paige was born July 7, 1906, in Mobile, Alabama. Seventh child of John and Lula Paige. 12 children total. Poor family. Very poor. Father worked as a gardener. Mother took in laundry. They lived in a shotgun house in a black neighborhood called Down the Bay. Dirt streets, outdoor toilets, no electricity. Young Leroy earned money carrying bags at the train station. Satchels, they called them. Luggage. He rigged up a pole with ropes to carry multiple bags at once. Other kids called him Satchel. The nickname stuck for life. At age 12, Satchel got in trouble. Shoplifting, skipping school, running wild. His mother couldn't control him. The court sent him to the industrial school for Negro children in Mount Meigs, Alabama. Reform school. Prison for kids. Satchel later said, "I traded 5 years of freedom to learn how to pitch, Because at that reform school, somebody taught him to throw a baseball, taught him mechanics, taught him control, taught him to use his long arms and legs to generate power. By the time he got out at age 17, Satchel Paige could throw a baseball faster than almost anyone alive. He joined a semi-pro team in Mobile. Word spread. This tall, skinny kid from down the bay throws fire. 1926. Chattanooga Black Lookout signed him. Professional Negro Leagues baseball. Paige was 19 years old. 6'3", 160 pounds. Looked like a strong wind might blow him over. Then he threw his first pitch, and batters understood. This kid was different. His fastball hummed. Players swore they could hear it buzz past their ears. Paige called it his B-ball. Throw it hard enough and it sounds like a B. Estimates put his fastball speed at over 100 miles per hour. In 1926, no radar guns back then, but batters knew. That ball moved faster than anything they'd seen. By 1927, Paige was pitching for the Birmingham Black Barons. Still learning, still developing, but already dominant. He won his first game 6-5, then kept winning, and winning, and winning. 1932. Paige was 26 years old, entering his prime. He went 32-7 that season. 32 wins, 7 losses. Think about that. In today's MLB, 20 wins is incredible. Paige won 32 games in one season. But here's what made Satchel Paige legendary. It wasn't just the wins. It wasn't just the strikeouts. It was the showmanship. It was the confidence. It was the way he made baseball fun while dominating hitters. Paige would call his outfielders off the field, literally tell them to sit down. Then he'd strike out the side. 3 batters, 9 pitches, 3 strikeouts. Outfielders sitting on the grass watching. Paige proving he didn't need defense, just his arm. He'd tell batters what pitch was coming, fastball high and outside, then throw it exactly there and still get a strikeout. He'd wind up like a pretzel, all arms and legs, then unleash a pitch that exploded past the batter before he could react. Negro Leagues hitters hated facing Satchel Paige, not because he showed them up, because they couldn't hit him. The best hitters in Negro Leagues, the best hitters in the world, couldn't touch Satchel Paige when he was on. 1934. Paige injured his arm. Serious injury. Doctors said his career might be over. He couldn't throw hard, couldn't throw strikes. Pain shot through his shoulder. Teams stopped signing him. So Paige went to the Dominican Republic. Dictator Rafael Trujillo wanted a baseball team that would win the championship. Trujillo offered Paige money to come pitch, lots of money. Paige went. He rehabbed his arm, slowly regained his velocity, and led Trujillo's team to the championship. The legend says Trujillo's soldiers stood behind the dugout with machine guns during games. Win or else. Paige said that story was exaggerated, but he did say the pressure was real. Trujillo expected wins. Paige delivered. He came back to the United States in 1938. Arm healthy, fastball restored, and he was better than before. Because now he had more than just velocity. He had control, he had wisdom, he had experience. Paige developed multiple pitches. The B-ball fastball, yes, but also a hesitation pitch where he'd pause mid-delivery and mess up the batter's timing. A curveball that dropped off a table. A changeup that looked like a fastball until it wasn't. He became a complete pitcher. 1942. Paige was 36 years old, ancient for a pitcher. Most pitchers retire by then. Paige was just hitting his stride. He signed with the Kansas City Monarchs. That season he led them to the Negro American League Championship, and that brings us to one of the most famous confrontations in Negro Leagues history. 1942, Negro Leagues World Series. Kansas City Monarchs versus Homestead Grays. Satchel Paige versus Josh Gibson. The greatest pitcher against the greatest hitter. Game tied. Late innings. Paige is on the mound. Gibson is due up. But first, there are two batters ahead of Gibson. Paige looks at his catcher, waves him off, intentionally walks both batters, loads the bases. 1 out. And now, Josh Gibson steps to the plate. The crowd is going insane. 40,000 people screaming. Everybody knows what's happening. Satchel Paige wanted to face Josh Gibson, with the bases loaded, with the game on the line. This is theater. This is competition. This is greatness. Gibson steps into the batter's box. Paige winds up, throws a fastball right down the middle. Gibson swings. Miss. Strike 1. Paige throws another fastball. Same spot. Gibson swings. Foul ball. Strike 2. The crowd is standing. Everyone's holding their breath. Paige winds up one more time, throws his fastest fastball of the night, right down Broadway. Gibson swings. Misses. Strike 3. Strikeout. Game over. Josh Gibson yells at Paige from the batter's box. You might be the best, but I'm the greatest hitter. Satchel Paige just smiles and yells back. Best beats greatest every time. That story became legend, passed down through generations. Old-timers told their grandchildren. Your grandpa probably heard that story from his grandpa. That's the kind of moment that becomes mythology. The best pitcher facing the best hitter, and the best pitcher winning. Paige kept pitching, and pitching, and pitching. 1943, 1944, 1945, 1946, 1947. Into his 40s now. Still winning, still dominating, still drawing crowds wherever he went. Then, on July 7th, 1948, Satchel Paige's 42nd birthday, the Cleveland Indians signed him. 42 years old, 2 days after his birthday. First black pitcher in the American League, 22 years after starting his professional career. 22 years. Paige should have been in MLB from the beginning, from age 19. His entire prime wasted. No, not wasted. Stolen. MLB stole Satchel Paige's prime years because of racism. But even at 42, Paige proved he belonged. His first season with the Indians, 1948, he went 6-1. 6 wins, 1 loss. 2.48 ERA. The Indians won the American League pennant, made the World Series. Paige became the first black pitcher to play in a World Series. He pitched in relief in Game 5, 2/3 of an inning, didn't allow a run. The Indians won the World Series, and Satchel Paige at age 42 finally got his championship ring in the major leagues. But it should have been 10 championships, 15 championships. If MLB had let him in at age 19, Satchel Paige would have won 250 games, 300 games, maybe more. He would be considered the greatest pitcher in baseball history. No debate, no question. Instead, he won 6 games his first MLB season at age 42. He pitched a few more years in MLB, retired, then came back in 1965 at age 59 to pitch 3 innings for the Kansas City Athletics. 59 years old. Oldest player to ever appear in an MLB game. 3 innings. Didn't allow a run. Even at 59, Satchel Paige could still pitch. In his Negro Leagues career, official records show 125 wins. But that's only counting official league games. Barnstorming games, exhibition games, winter ball. All of that included Paige won an estimated 2,000 games in his career. 2,000. Nobody in history won close to that many games. He struck out an estimated 3,000 batters in official Negro Leagues games, another 5,000 in barnstorming and exhibition games. He pitched nearly every day for 30 years. He threw complete games in the afternoon, then pitched relief at night. He traveled from town to town pitching wherever they'd pay him, and he beat MLB players regularly. Exhibition games between Negro Leagues teams and MLB All-Stars happened often in the off-season. Paige faced the best white players in America: Dizzy Dean, Bob Feller, Joe DiMaggio, Ted Williams. He struck them out, made them look foolish, beat them again and again. In 1966, Ted Williams was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, one of the greatest hitters in MLB history. In his induction speech, Williams said, "I hope that someday Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson will be voted into the Hall of Fame as symbols of the great Negro League players who are not here only because they weren't given the chance." Ted Williams knew. He faced Satchel Paige in exhibition games. He knew Paige was one of the greatest pitchers ever, and Williams used his Hall of Fame speech to advocate for Negro Leagues players. That's respect. 5 years later, 1971, Satchel Paige was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. First Negro Leagues player to make it. 65 years old, 50 years after starting his career. He finally got his recognition. Paige lived until 1982. He died June 8, 1982 at age 75. He lived long enough to see his legacy acknowledged, long enough to see MLB finally admit he was one of the greatest, long enough to be present for his Hall of Fame induction. Josh Gibson never got that. He died before the door opened. Paige got through, but only after his prime was long gone, only after MLB stole the best years of his career. And here's what they really don't want you to know. Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige weren't anomalies. They weren't the only two great players in a league full of mediocrity. They were the stars of a league packed with Hall of Fame talent. The Negro Leagues were loaded with players who could have dominated an MLB, and we can prove it. Let me introduce you to three more legends, three more players whose names should be as famous as Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb. Three more stolen legacies. Cool Papa Bell. James Thomas Bell. Born in Starkville, Mississippi, 1893. Played center field and could run like nobody you've ever seen. Stories about Cool Papa Bell sound like exaggeration until you realize everybody who saw him play tells the same stories. They said Cool Papa Bell was so fast, he could turn off the light switch and be in bed before the room got dark. They said he could hit a ground ball up the middle and get hit by the ball sliding into second base. They said he stole 175 bases in a single season. 175. Rickey Henderson holds the MLB record with 130 stolen bases in 1982. Cool Papa Bell stole 45 more than that. In the 1920s, without modern nutrition, without modern training, without modern equipment, Bell played from 1922 to 1946, 24 years in Negro Leagues, career batting average of 316. But his value wasn't just hitting, it was speed. He disrupted every game he played. Pitchers couldn't focus with him on base. Catchers panicked. Infielders played shallow, and he'd bunt past them. Infielders played deep, and he'd beat out ground balls. One story says, Cool Papa Bell hit a ball to the outfield. Rounded first saw the outfielder bobble it and scored from first base. On a single, he turned a single into an inside-the-park home run because nobody could catch him. Major League scouts watched him. They wrote in their reports, "Fastest player we've ever seen, but we can't sign him." Sound familiar? The talent was there. The ability was there. The color was wrong. Cool Papa Bell was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1974. He was 80 years old. He had been retired for 28 years. Better late than never. He deserved it 40 years earlier. Oscar Charleston. The Black Ty Cobb, they called him. But that's an insult. Oscar Charleston was better than Ty Cobb. Played from 1915 to 1944. Center fielder and first baseman. Power hitter. Great fielder. Smart player. Leader. Career batting average over 350. Comparable to Ty Cobb's 367. But Charleston played in worse conditions with less support against equal or better competition. And Charleston had power. Ty Cobb hit 117 home runs in his career. Oscar Charleston hit over 250 documented home runs. Some estimates say over 300. John McGraw was a famous MLB manager. Won 10 pennants with the New York Giants. Managed from 1899 to 1932. McGraw said Oscar Charleston was the greatest player he ever saw any color, any league. McGraw said if he could sign one player to start a team, he'd take Charleston over Babe Ruth, over Ty Cobb, over anyone. That's not a Negro Leagues fan talking. That's a white MLB Hall of Fame manager saying the best player in baseball was a black man he couldn't sign. Charleston was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1976. He had been dead for 30 years. Died in 1954 at age 57. Never got to see his induction. Never got the recognition while he was alive. Buck Leonard. Walter Fenner Leonard. Born in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, 1907. First baseman. Played most of his career with the Homestead Grays alongside Josh Gibson. They called Leonard the Black Lou Gehrig. But again, that's disrespectful. Buck Leonard was as good as Lou Gehrig, maybe better. Career batting average over 340. Consistent power hitter, great fielder, team leader. Played from 1933 to 1950. 17 years. When Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in 1947, Buck Leonard was 40 years old. Too old for MLB to give him a chance. His entire prime stolen. By the time MLB let black players in Leonard's career was over, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1972, same year as Josh Gibson. Leonard was 65 years old. He lived until 1997. 90 years old. At least he got to enjoy his Hall of Fame status for 25 years. Those three players, Cool Papa Bell, Oscar Charleston, and Buck Leonard, all played on the 1934 Pittsburgh Crawfords with Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige. 5 Hall of Famers on one team. 5 of the greatest players in baseball history on the same roster. No MLB team has ever had 5 Hall of Famers in their prime on the same team. But the 1934 Pittsburgh Crawfords did. That's how much talent was in Negro Leagues. That's how stacked these teams were. And here's the proof that Negro Leagues talent was equal to MLB. When they played each other, Negro Leagues teams won. Exhibition games happened all the time. After the MLB season ended, white players would barnstorm across the country, playing local teams for extra money. Negro Leagues teams played them and beat them. Satchel Paige faced Dizzy Dean, one of the best MLB pitchers of the 1930s, in multiple exhibition games. Paige's teams won most of those games. Paige struck out Dean, made him look ordinary. Josh Gibson faced Bob Feller, one of the hardest throwers in MLB history, and hit home runs off him multiple times. Feller later admitted Gibson was the greatest hitter he ever faced. When Negro Leagues All-Star teams played MLB All-Star teams in exhibition games, the Negro Leagues teams won 60 to 70% of the time. These weren't minor league teams. These weren't semi-pro teams. These were the best white players in America, and Negro Leagues teams beat them regularly, but white newspapers barely covered it. When Negro Leagues teams won, the story got buried on page 12 in tiny print. When MLB teams won front page headlines, the media made sure white America never knew how good Negro Leagues players were. And then 1947 happened. Jackie Robinson, Brooklyn Dodgers, breaking the color barrier. The most celebrated moment in baseball history. And it was. It was important. It was historic. It was necessary. But it also destroyed the Negro Leagues. And nobody talks about that part. Jackie Robinson played one season in Negro Leagues. 1945, Kansas City Monarchs. He hit 345. Good season. Not great, not Hall of Fame level yet. But he was athletic, disciplined, and Branch Rickey, general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, saw something in him. October 23, 1945. Rickey signed Robinson to a minor league contract with the Montreal Royals, the Dodgers' top farm team. Robinson played one season there, hit 349, led the league in batting average, dominated. April 15, 1947. Jackie Robinson debuted with the Brooklyn Dodgers. First black player in Major League Baseball in the modern era. He faced death threats, hate mail, racist fans, teammates who didn't want him there, opposing players who tried to injure him, and he dominated. Rookie of the Year. Career 311 batting average. Hall of Fame in 1962. Jackie Robinson's success was a triumph for civil rights. It opened doors. It proved what everybody in the black community already knew, but white America refused to believe. Black players could compete. Black players could win. Black players belonged. But here's the part they don't teach in history class. Jackie Robinson's success destroyed the Negro Leagues economically. Not because Robinson did anything wrong, because of what happened after. Between 1947 and 1952, Major League Baseball signed the best Negro Leagues players: Larry Doby, Roy Campanella, Monty Irvin, Don Newcomb, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Ernie Banks. All the stars. All the players who drew crowds. All the moneymakers. Negro Leagues teams lost their best talent. Attendance dropped. Revenue collapsed. Teams folded. 1946. Negro Leagues attendance was over 3 million fans. 3 million. 1949. 1 million fans. 1952. 500,000 fans. By 1960, only a handful of teams remained barely surviving. The Negro National League folded in 1948, 1 year after Jackie Robinson's debut. The Eastern Colored League had already folded in 1928, but reformed as the Negro American League in 1937. By 1960, that league was dead too. Integration killed the Negro Leagues. Not because black players weren't good enough, because MLB took the best players and left the rest to collapse. And who suffered the 400 players who didn't get signed by MLB? The 50 managers and coaches who lost their jobs because teams folded. The 30 team owners who watched their businesses collapse. The 100 umpires who lost their work. MLB didn't hire black umpires until 1966. What were those umpires supposed to do for income? 200 black sports writers lost their beats. The Chicago Defender, Pittsburgh Courier, and Baltimore Afro-American all cut their baseball coverage because Negro Leagues didn't exist anymore. Thousands of support staff, bus drivers, stadium workers, equipment managers, groundskeepers, ticket sellers, all lost their jobs. Kansas City Monarchs owner J.L. Wilkinson saw the collapse coming. He sold the team in 1948. Smart move financially. But the team folded completely by 1965. If that team still existed today and had stayed in the Wilkinson family, the franchise would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That wealth, gone. Stolen. Lost. Estimates say the Negro Leagues generated $50 million per year at their peak in the 1940s. That's $800 million in today's money. By 1955, revenue dropped to $2 million per year. By 1960, almost nothing. Total wealth destroyed. Conservative estimates say $500 million lost. That's over $8 billion in today's money. $8 billion of black wealth. Gone. Not because of bad business decisions, not because of poor management, because integration was one-sided. MLB took the talent. They didn't buy the teams. They didn't hire the managers. They didn't employ the umpires. They didn't support the infrastructure. They cherry-picked the best players and let everything else die. Think about what that means for your family. If your great-grandfather worked for a Negro Leagues team, he lost his job in the early 1950s. If your family owned a business near a Negro Leagues stadium, you lost your customer base. If your grandfather was a Negro Leagues player who wasn't good enough for MLB, his career ended at age 25, with no pension, no benefits, no recognition. Generational wealth, gone. Business opportunities, destroyed. Economic infrastructure, collapsed. This is the part they don't teach when they celebrate Jackie Robinson. Yes, Robinson's breakthrough was historic. Yes, it was necessary. Yes, it changed America. But it came with a cost, and black communities paid that cost. Josh Gibson earned $30,000 to $40,000 per year in the 1940s. If he'd lived and played in MLB from 1947 to 1957, he would have earned hundreds of thousands more. Invested properly, that money would be worth millions today. His descendants would be wealthy. Instead, he died broke in 1947. His family got nothing. If Negro Leagues teams had survived and grown into modern franchises, there would be multiple black-owned professional baseball teams worth hundreds of millions of dollars today. Black billionaires, black generational wealth, black economic power. Instead, 0 black-owned MLB teams exist today. 0. Not one. Because when integration happened, MLB didn't integrate the ownership. They integrated the labor. They took the players and destroyed the business owners. That's not progress. That's theft disguised as progress. And it's the same pattern you see everywhere in American history. When black people build wealth, white systems either destroy it or take it over. Tulsa, 1921. Rosewood, 1923. Urban renewal in the 1960s, destroying black neighborhoods across America. Gentrification today, pushing black families out of neighborhoods they built. Same pattern. Build, thrive, get destroyed, repeat. The Negro Leagues are just one example, but it's a clear example. Documented, undeniable. They built a $50 million per year industry from nothing, and integration killed it. Now let me show you how they erased it from history. Because the economic destruction wasn't enough, they also had to make sure you forgot it ever existed. They didn't just destroy the Negro Leagues economically. They erased them from memory, from education, from history. And they did it deliberately. Let me show you exactly how. First, the physical erasure, records, statistics, documentation. Negro Leagues teams didn't have the resources MLB had. MLB kept meticulous records from day one. Every game, every at-bat, every pitch. Negro Leagues inconsistent. Black newspapers covered games, but not every game. Not every at-bat. Limited budgets meant limited record-keeping. When teams folded in the 1950s, what happened to their records? Lost, thrown away, burned. Nobody preserved them. Nobody thought they mattered. By the time historians realized these records were important, thousands of games were lost to history forever. Researchers estimate only 75% of Negro Leagues games from 1920 to 1948 can be documented. 25% gone. Imagine if MLB lost 25% of its history. Imagine if nobody knew what Babe Ruth did in 1927. That's what happened to Negro Leagues. Josh Gibson's 800 home runs. We can only prove about 200 because the rest weren't documented or the records were lost. Satchel Paige's 2,000 wins. Only 125 are officially documented. The rest, gone. And here's the worst part. This wasn't accident. White historians didn't care about preserving Negro Leagues history. White institutions didn't value black baseball, so they let the records disappear. Compare that to MLB. Every statistic from 1876 forward is preserved, documented, analyzed, Available online. You can look up what happened in a random game in 1912. But good luck finding complete records from a Negro Leagues game in 1942. That's erasure. Physical, deliberate erasure. Second, educational suppression. How many of you learned about Josh Gibson in school? Raise your hand. Almost nobody. How many learned about Satchel Paige? A few more, maybe. But did they teach you he was the greatest pitcher in history? Did they teach you he beat MLB All-Stars regularly? No, they mentioned his name and moved on. American history textbooks dedicate entire chapters to baseball. Babe Ruth gets multiple pages. Jackie Robinson gets a section celebrating integration. But Negro Leagues 1 paragraph. Maybe. Sometimes not even mentioned. For 75 years, from 1947 to the 2020s, American students graduated high school without learning that Negro Leagues existed, without knowing Josh Gibson hit .372, without understanding that black baseball was thriving while MLB excluded black players. The Tulsa Race Massacre wasn't taught in Oklahoma schools for 70 years. Same erasure. Same deliberate choice to hide black success and black suffering. Why? Because teaching Negro Leagues history forces uncomfortable questions. If Negro Leagues players were that good, why were they excluded racism? If Negro Leagues teams generated $50 million per year, why did integration destroy them instead of integrating the businesses? Racism. If Josh Gibson was the greatest hitter ever, why isn't he as famous as Babe Ruth? Racism. Those questions make white America uncomfortable. So instead of teaching the truth, they erased it. Third, media manipulation. White newspapers barely covered Negro Leagues during their existence. When they did, the language was dismissive. Negro baseball. Colored league. Never with the respect of calling it Major League Baseball. When Negro Leagues teams beat MLB teams in exhibition games, where was the story? Page 12. Tiny column. Easy to miss. When MLB teams won front-page headlines. After 1947, white media framed integration as MLB allowing black players to compete. Like it was a gift. Like it was charity. Reality, MLB finally stopped banning the best athletes in America. That's not charity. That's long overdue justice. But the media narrative made white America feel good. Look how progressive we are letting black people play baseball. Never mind that black people had been playing better baseball in their own league for 30 years. Even in modern times, the erasure continued. Ken Burns made an 18-hour documentary called Baseball in 1994. Considered the definitive history of the sport. How much time did he spend on Negro Leagues? About 30 minutes. Out of 18 hours. 30 minutes to cover 30 years of elite baseball with hundreds of Hall of Fame players. That's erasure. ESPN's lists of greatest players barely mentioned Negro League stars until the 2000s. MLB Network shows focused on Ruth Cobb DiMaggio Williams. Satchel Paige got occasional mentions as a curiosity, not as the GOAT. The media made sure new generations didn't know. Made sure the stories died with the players. Made sure you never learned your history. Fourth, legal and institutional exclusion. The Baseball Hall of Fame opened in 1936. First Negro Leagues player inducted Satchel Paige, 1971. 35 years later, they inducted Babe Ruth in the first class, Ty Cobb in the first class, Walter Johnson in the first class, all 1936. But Oscar Charleston, who John McGraw said was better than all of them, waited until 1976, 40 years after the Hall of Fame opened. Josh Gibson died in 1947, inducted 1972. Waited 25 years after his death, Cool Papa Bell retired 1946, inducted 1974. 28 years later. Buck Leonard retired 1950, inducted 1972. 22 years later. They made Negro Leagues legends. Wait, while inferior white players got inducted immediately. Well, because the Hall of Fame voters were old white men who didn't think Negro Leagues counted as real baseball. And even after inducting Negro Leagues players into the Hall of Fame, MLB didn't count their statistics as official. Josh Gibson's .372 batting average unofficial. Satchel Paige's 125 wins unofficial. Cool Papa Bell's 175 stolen bases unofficial. For 77 years, from 1947 to 2024, Major League Baseball treated Negro League stats as separate, not part of the real record books. Gibson's numbers existed, but they didn't count. Why? Because counting them would mean admitting the greatest hitter in baseball history was a black man who died without ever getting his chance. That's an uncomfortable truth. So MLB ignored it for 77 years, until December 16, 2020. Rob Manfred, MLB commissioner, announced that MLB officially recognizes 7 Negro Leagues from 1920 to 1948 as major leagues. Official. Equal status. Finally. 4 years later, May 28, 2024, MLB integrated Negro League statistics into the official MLB record books. Josh Gibson became the all-time batting average leader, all-time slugging percentage leader, all-time OPS leader. After 77 years, the truth finally entered the record books. But why did it take 77 years? Because MLB didn't want to admit they were wrong, didn't want to admit they stole from Negro Leagues, didn't want to face the uncomfortable truth that racism denied the greatest players in history their rightful place. They waited until every single Negro Leagues player was dead before acknowledging the truth. Satchel Paige died 1982. Josh Gibson died 1947. Cool Papa Bell died 1991. Oscar Charleston died 1954. Buck Leonard died 1997. The last Negro Leagues player died in 2015. 9 years later, in 2024, MLB integrated the statistics. Convenient timing. Wait until everyone's dead so you don't have to pay them. Don't have to apologize to them. Don't have to face them. That's not reconciliation. That's waiting for the witnesses to die so you can control the narrative. Do you see the pattern? Now physical erasure, educational erasure, media erasure, legal erasure, all working together to make sure you never knew your ancestors built a baseball empire. Make sure you never knew your history includes the greatest athletes in American history. Make sure you never knew what was stolen from your community. They wanted you to think MLB was the only league, the real league, the league that mattered. They wanted you to think Jackie Robinson was the first great black player, when really he was just the first one they allowed in. They wanted you to forget that Negro Leagues existed. Forget that your grandfather watched Josh Gibson hit 70 home runs in a season. Forget that your great-uncle played semi-pro ball dreaming of making it to Negro Leagues. Forget that black communities built wealth through baseball. They wanted you to accept integration as a gift, instead of recognizing it as belated justice that came with economic devastation. But you know now. You can't unknow this. And that brings us to the question, what does this mean for you today? In 2025, why does this matter? Let me connect the dots for you. This isn't ancient history. This isn't just a sad story about baseball players who died decades ago. This is about your life right now. This is about the wealth gap. This is about reparations. This is about why your family struggles financially, while white families who did less have more. The median white household in America has $188,000 in wealth. The median black household has $24,000. That's an 8-to-1 ratio. White families have 8 times the wealth of black families. Why they tell you it's because black people don't work hard, because black people make bad financial decisions. Because black culture doesn't value education or savings. They blame you for the gap. That's a lie. The wealth gap exists because they stole from you, repeatedly, systematically, for centuries. And Negro Leagues baseball is one documented example of that theft. 1946. Negro Leagues generated $50 million in revenue, $800 million in today's money. Black-owned teams, black employees, black wealth circulating in black communities. By 1960, that was gone. The wealth didn't disappear because of bad management. It was destroyed by one-sided integration. If those 30 Negro Leagues teams had survived and grown into modern franchises, black families would own businesses worth billions today. The Kansas City Monarchs, if still black-owned, would be worth $500 million minimum. Multiply that by 30 teams. $15 billion in black wealth that should exist, but doesn't. Josh Gibson made $40,000 per year in the 1940s. If he'd played in MLB from age 19, instead of being banned, he'd have made over $1 million in his career. Adjusted for inflation, that's $15 million. Invested properly, passed down through generations, his family would be worth $50 million today. Instead, he died broke. His descendants got nothing. Multiply that story by 400 Negro Leagues players who never got their MLB chance. Multiply it by the team owners who lost their businesses. Multiply it by the employees who lost their jobs. The total wealth stolen from black communities through the destruction of Negro Leagues, tens of billions of dollars. And that's just one industry, one example. Now multiply that across every industry. Tulsa, 1921. Black Wall Street destroyed. $1.8 million in insurance claims denied. $32 million in today's money. That's just one city. Rosewood, Florida. Wilmington, North Carolina. East St. Louis, Illinois. Springfield, Illinois. Atlanta, Georgia. Dozens of thriving black communities destroyed. Then redlining. Government policy from the 1930s to 1960s that prevented black families from getting mortgages in good neighborhoods. White families bought houses for $10,000 in the 1950s. Those houses are worth $500,000 today. 50-to-1 return. Black families were denied that opportunity. That's generational wealth stolen. Urban renewal in the 1950s and 60s. Government called it urban renewal. Black communities called it Negro removal. Highways built through thriving black neighborhoods destroying homes and businesses. Black families forced to move, never fairly compensated. More wealth gone. The GI Bill after World War II. White veterans got low-interest home loans, college tuition business loans. Black veterans denied. Banks wouldn't give them loans. Colleges wouldn't admit them. The government programs were written to exclude black people. More wealth stolen. Add it all up. Economists estimate white America has stolen over $100 trillion from black America since slavery ended. $100 trillion. That's not exaggeration. That's documented theft through policy violence and exclusion. So when they ask why the wealth gap exists, the answer is simple. You built wealth. They stole it. You built it again. They destroyed it again. Over and over for 150 years. Negro Leagues baseball is proof, documented, undeniable. You built a $50 million per year industry from nothing. Integration destroyed it. That wealth should have been passed down to you. It's not in your bank account. It's in theirs. Now let's talk about reparations. That word makes some people uncomfortable. Good. It should be uncomfortable, because reparations aren't charity. Reparations are payment for debt owed. They say slavery was long ago, get over it. Fine. Let's talk about Negro Leagues. Josh Gibson died in 1947, 78 years ago. Your grandmother was alive then. This isn't ancient history. This is your grandmother's lifetime. MLB finally recognized Negro League statistics in 2024. 1 year ago. The erasure is ongoing. The theft is ongoing. This isn't past. This is present. So what is owed MLB should create a $1 billion fund for Negro Leagues descendants. Josh Gibson's family should be compensated for 77 years of erasure. Satchel Paige's family should receive payment for his stolen prime years. Every Negro Leagues player's family should receive compensation for lost wages, lost opportunities, lost wealth. MLB is a $15 billion per year industry. They can afford it. They owe it. But it's not just about money. It's about recognition. Every MLB stadium should have a permanent exhibit honoring local Negro Leagues teams. Every school should require Negro Leagues history and curriculum. The Baseball Hall of Fame should build a major wing dedicated to Negro Leagues, not a small corner exhibit. And this applies beyond baseball. America owes reparations for slavery. Yes, but also for everything that came after. Sharecropping, convict leasing, lynching, Tulsa, Rosewood, redlining, urban renewal, mass incarceration, police brutality. All of it is connected. All of it is theft. All of it requires payment. Germany pays Holocaust reparations to this day. Japan paid reparations to Japanese Americans interned during World War II. America paid reparations to Native American tribes. But America refuses to pay reparations to Black Americans. Why? Because the debt is so massive, they don't want to face it. Too bad. Pay up, not as beggars, as heirs of stolen empires, as descendants of millionaires who were murdered and robbed, as creditors demanding payment. This is what Negro Leagues history teaches you. Your ancestors weren't helpless victims. They were builders, entrepreneurs, millionaires. They created wealth against impossible odds. And when they did, white supremacy destroyed it. But they kept building. And you're still here, still building, still demanding what's owed. That's the legacy. That's the inheritance, not victimhood. Power. Now let me tell you who you are. Because everything you just learned should change how you see yourself. You're not the descendant of people who couldn't compete. You're the descendant of people who weren't allowed to compete. There's a difference. Josh Gibson hit .372. Better than anyone in MLB history. That's your bloodline. That's your DNA. Excellence despite everything working against you. Satchel Paige won 125 games after his prime at age 42. Imagine what he'd have done at 22. That's your heritage. Dominance delayed, but not denied. Cool Papa Bell stole 175 bases in a season. Speed that couldn't be contained. Oscar Charleston was called the greatest player John McGraw ever saw. Buck Leonard anchored championship teams for decades. That's who you come from. You're not descendants of victims. You're descendants of champions who were robbed of their crowns. You're descendants of millionaires whose wealth was stolen. You're descendants of empire builders whose empires were destroyed. That strength didn't disappear. It's in you. The same DNA that let Josh Gibson hit 70 home runs while facing death threats. The same DNA that let Satchel Paige pitch into his 60s. The same DNA that built Negro Leagues from nothing. That's your DNA. Your grandmother worked 2 jobs to send your mother to college. That's Josh Gibson energy, working twice as hard for half the recognition. Your grandfather bought a house despite banks denying him loans. That's Rube Foster vision. Building despite the obstacles. Your mother raised 4 kids alone after your father died. That's the resilience of players who traveled all night and played doubleheaders the next day. You come from warriors, not the type who waited for permission, the type who built their own leagues when they were excluded, The type who dominated despite being banned. The type who preserved their dignity when everything was designed to break them. And that's why they tried to erase this history. Because if you know who you come from, you won't accept being treated as less than. If you know your great-grandfather watched the greatest athletes in the world play Negro Leagues baseball, you won't believe the lie that black people are inferior. If you know your ancestors built a $50 million industry from nothing, you'll build again. They wanted you to think you come from nothing, that you have no history worth celebrating, that you should be grateful for the scraps they give you. That integration was a gift, but now you know. You come from greatness. You come from builders. You come from people who refuse to accept no. People who created their own opportunities when doors were closed. People who thrived despite systematic oppression. Your poverty isn't your fault. It's stolen wealth. Your struggle isn't because you're not working hard enough. It's because they destroyed what your ancestors built. Your lack of generational wealth isn't bad financial decisions. It's inheritance that was taken. If Negro Leagues teams had survived, you might be inheriting a family business worth millions. If Josh Gibson had been allowed in MLB, his descendants might be rich. If the 30 black-owned teams had grown into modern franchises, there would be black billionaires from baseball. But that wealth was stolen. And you're starting over. Again. Like your ancestors did after slavery. Like they did after Tulsa. Like they did after redlining. Like they did after urban renewal. Stolen. Rebuild. Stolen. Rebuild. Over and over. But here's the beautiful part. You're still here. They tried to break you with slavery. You survived. They tried to terrorize you with lynching. You built anyway. They tried to exclude you with Jim Crow. You created Negro Leagues. They tried to erase you from history. You're learning that history right now. Every generation they try to stop you. Every generation you rise. That's divine appointment. That's purpose. That's God saying, I preserved you through everything because you have a mission. God brought your ancestors through the Middle Passage. Why, so you could be here. God sustained them through slavery. Why, so they could build. God protected them through Jim Crow. Why, so they could create Negro Leagues, proving black excellence to the world. God preserved you through everything you've faced. Why, so you could reclaim this history and pass it forward. This isn't about revenge. This is about truth. This isn't about hating white people. This is about demanding justice. This isn't about dwelling on the past. This is about understanding how the past created the present so you can change the future. You're not a victim. You're an heir. You're not poor. You're wealthy with stolen inheritance. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from the shoulders of giants. Josh Gibson's greatness lives in you. Satchel Paige's determination lives in you. Rube Foster's vision lives in you. The resilience of 400 Negro Leagues players lives in you. Use it. Your grandmother told you stories about seeing baseball games. She was telling you about champions. Your grandfather talked about Satchel Paige with reverence. He was telling you about greatness. Your parents worked impossible hours to give you opportunities. They were channeling the spirit of players who played 3 games in one day. You carry that legacy. You are that legacy. And your job is to pass it forward. Teach your children. Tell your nieces and nephews. Share this history with your church. Make sure the next generation knows. Because that's how they win. When you forget. When the stories die with the generation that lived them. When the erasure becomes permanent. They win when you don't know who you are. But you know now. And you can't unknow it. Josh Gibson. 372 batting average. Greatest hitter in baseball history. Satchel Paige. 125 wins after age 42. Greatest pitcher in history. Negro Leagues. $50 million per year. Black-owned baseball empire. That's your history. That's your inheritance. Don't let them erase it again. If you never learned about Josh Gibson in school, comment Gibson below. If you didn't know Satchel Paige beat MLB All-Stars regularly, comment Paige. If this is the first time you're hearing that Negro Leagues statistics are now officially higher than MLB legends, comment truth. Hit that like button. Not for me. For Josh Gibson. For Satchel Paige. For the 400 players who never got their chance. For the 30 team owners who lost their businesses. For the history they tried to erase. Share this video right now. Send it to your family group chat. Post it on your timeline. Send it to your pastor. Send it to your children's teachers. Because schools won't teach this. Textbooks won't include this. The only way this history survives is if you share it. The algorithm buries Black history. YouTube doesn't promote these videos. You have to fight the algorithm by engaging. Like, comment, share, subscribe. All of it. Otherwise, this video dies and the erasure continues. Last Negro Leagues player died in 2015. Last person who saw Josh Gibson play died recently. We're losing the eyewitnesses. The stories will die unless we become the storytellers. Unless you take responsibility for preserving this. Don't scroll past. Engage right now. Your ancestors are depending on you. Don't let their legacy die because you were too lazy to click a button. Subscribe to this channel. We have hundreds more stories like this. The Black World War II unit that saved Europe and never got recognition. The black woman who armed 750 slaves and led them to freedom with a rifle. The black towns that thrived until white mobs burned them down. Every week we expose what they buried. Don't miss it. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and share every video. This is a movement. This is a mission. This is war against erasure. And you're a soldier now. Visit the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City, Missouri if you can. 18th and Vine District. They preserve the history. They honor the players. Support them. Donate if you're able. Buy books about Negro Leagues. Read them. Teach them to your children. Demand your local school district add Negro Leagues to curriculum. Show up to school board meetings. Bring this history. Make them teach it. Don't wait for them to do it voluntarily. Demand it. Support efforts to preserve Negro Leagues ballparks. Some still exist. Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama, oldest professional baseball park in America, home of the Birmingham Black Barons. It's still there. They need funding to maintain it. Help if you can. This isn't just information. This is inheritance. Josh Gibson's greatness is your legacy. Satchel Paige's dominance is your heritage. Negro Leagues empire building is your blueprint. Don't let them erase it again. Pass it forward. Share. Now. Bow your heads with me. Father God, we come before you today with hearts full of pride and pain. Pride for the warriors who built a Negro Leagues from nothing. Pain for the 77 years of erasure they endured. We thank you for Satchel Paige, who pitched into his 60s to prove Black excellence cannot be silenced. We thank you for Josh Gibson, the greatest hitter who ever lived, whose legacy was buried, but couldn't be destroyed. We thank you for Rube Foster, who didn't wait for white approval, but built an empire with his own hands. We thank you for Cool, Papa Bell, whose speed defied physics. For Oscar Charleston, who John McGraw said was the greatest player of any color. For Buck Leonard, who anchored championship teams for 2 decades. For the 2,300 Negro Leagues players whose names are now finally in the record books. Lord, we pray for the families of these legends. Josh Gibson's descendants, who waited 77 years for MLB to admit the truth. Satchel Paige's children, who fought to preserve his story when the world wanted to forget. The families of team owners who lost businesses worth millions. Give them peace. Give them honor. Give them what is owed. We pray for everyone watching this video. For those who never knew, Josh Gibson hit .372. For those who never learned, Satchel Paige was the greatest pitcher alive. For those who thought Negro Leagues was inferior baseball, open their eyes, lift the veil. Let them see the truth. We pray for the young generation. Let them know their ancestors weren't second class. Let them know Negro Leagues was elite. Let them carry this pride, this legacy, this warrior spirit into their own battles. Make them builders like Rube Foster. Make them champions like Josh Gibson. Make them unbreakable like Satchel Paige. We pray for justice. MLB acknowledged Negro Leagues in 2020. They integrated stats in 2024. But where are the reparations? Where is compensation for 77 years of erasure? Where is payment to families who lost wealth, lost businesses, lost inheritance? We demand what is owed, not as beggars, as heirs of stolen empires. We pray for ourselves. Give us the courage of Satchel Paige, who kept pitching until age 59 because his purpose wasn't finished. Give us the excellence of Josh Gibson, who hit .372 under impossible conditions. Give us the vision of Rube Foster, who built when others said it couldn't be done. Give us the speed of Cool Papa Bell, moving so fast our enemies can't catch us. Give us the power of Oscar Charleston dominating despite being denied our rightful place. Make us keepers of this truth. Make us teachers of this history. Make us warriors for justice. Make us builders of new empires on the foundation our ancestors laid. Let us never forget. Let us never be silent. Let us never accept erasure until every child knows Josh Gibson's name. Until every school teaches Negro Leagues history. Until every stolen dollar is repaid. Until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Until the wealth gap is closed. Until reparations are paid. Until our children inherit what our great-grandparents built. We claim our inheritance today. We reclaim our history today. We demand our reparations today. We will not be erased. We will not be silenced. We will not forget. In Jesus' name, who said the truth will set you free, and we claim that freedom today. Amen. Satchel Paige said, "Don't look back. Something might be gaining on you." But I'm telling you today, do look back. Because your ancestors' greatness is behind you, pushing you forward. Josh Gibson's .372 batting average. Satchel Paige's 125 wins at age 42. Negro Leagues $50 million per year. Cool Papa Bell's 175 stolen bases. Oscar Charleston's dominance that made White Hall of Fame managers say he was the best they ever saw. That's your foundation. Build on it. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from their shoulders. Stand on their legacy and reach higher. Walk in truth. Demand justice. Teach your children. You are descendants of the greatest athletes America tried to erase. They failed. You're still here. Still building. Still dominating. Still rising. God bless you. Stay proud. Stay powerful. Stay free.